Welcome everyone to Couch Potato Diary. Happy Tuesday. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Coming up on this show, a lot to cover. We are going into the fantasy football playoffs. And yes, Toxic and I will be facing off once again for fantasy football supremacy. So we got waiver wires to look at. We have the dumpster darlings, the best unexpected performances from last week. Plus, a recap of Monday Night Raw, and we'll get to some of the regular Wednesday stuff, looking at the NFL Power Rankings, and, of course, looking as well at new UFC pound-for-pound rankings. So that's just a quick intro here off the top. That's kind of how we're going to be maneuvering things for the next little bit, is that the Wednesdays will be more for video games. That'll be the extended video game stream day, where we can kind of get caught up on a lot of the stuff that I want to get finished on. And so to be able to do that, we're going to put both the Tuesday show and the Wednesday show together just for the live stream. So for those watching on YouTube later or listening in podcast form later, if you want the NFL Power Rankings a day early and the Pound for Pound Rankings or all the other Wednesday stuff a day early, you can check me out over on Twitch. Again, twitch.tv/primetimepk is the place to go for all of that for those watching on YouTube. It's right there. So yeah, that's how we're going to do it. So Wednesday, there's still going to be a podcast. It is still going to be the, power rankings, and it'll still be the pound for pound rankings and stuff like that. It's just for Tuesdays, we're going to put it all into one stream, and then I'll chop it all up later and probably exclude some of this at least from a whole lot of it. But that is, that's how we're going to do things. So let's, start with the regular Tuesday stuff, as we get into the fantasy football waiver wire.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, fantasy football waiver wire time. It is officially now the playoffs if your league is not gigantic. Either way, it's either the start of the playoffs or the continuation of the playoffs, and waiver wire is very important. So those in the live chat, with the exception, of course, of Toxic, because I'm playing him this week, and so Toxic, just pick up your Raiders. That's all. That's all I'm gonna say. Like Aiden O'Connell, lock that one in. Ignore the fact that he left the field. Actually, I do have a Raider in here, so I can't go too hard on that joke, but make sure you lock in those Vegas Raiders for the next couple of weeks. This one's going to feel like I'm kind of trolling a little bit, but I actually think Bryce Young has been playing pretty well. And so at the quarterback spot, he is, I think, the main streaming option that you can roll with this week. He's 6% rostered. He's playing better. He is playing better football, and that's why I think he is someone that you can go out and feel comfortable with. They're facing the Cowboys this week, and we just saw like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, all them had a pretty good week. Now, I'm not anticipating 40 points being put up by any of the guys on the Panthers, but I do think that you can feel pretty confident rolling out there with your Carolina Panthers this week. And then also, after the Cowboys matchup, they get Arizona and they get Tampa Bay. So the rest of the fantasy playoffs kind of feels like you can trust Bryce Young. He could be someone that you really do feel comfortable with going into, like I said, these fantasy playoff matchups. And our number one wide receiver is actually on his team. We're doing the stack. We're looking at Xavier Legette, 28% rostered, 6+ targets in each of the last 3 weeks. 8 targets last week, only 2 receptions, but I do think he'll bounce back. And again, that schedule that Bryce Young is playing in the fantasy playoffs, Xavier Legette gets that as well, right? So that is where I think that, again, maybe a bit of a deeper league-ish. I don't think that we're going to be rocking with him Toxic in the Vampire League, but I do think that this is going to be someone that can help out in those 12, even 14-team leagues, and someone who can really put up a couple of good points there. Also a wide receiver that we can pick up. 16% rostered. It's Joshua Palmer, with the LA Chargers. I know. He drops the football a lot. But Eight plus targets in 2 of the last 3 weeks. It's a great matchup against Tampa Bay. We have said this all season long. You can throw on the Bucks. And so I think Joshua Palmer is going to have a few opportunities where he is going to be able to push the ball down the field and be able to put up some, again, big fantasy points. You hope that the trust is still there, although again this week it was 8 targets, so you feel pretty good about that. I think Joshua Palmer is someone, again, this one is probably a bit more for the 14 to 16 teamers, but I think even in 12 teamers, even with no more bye weeks, but injuries happen and stuff like that. So I think Josh Palmer is someone who is certainly trustworthy, I would say, and at least pick up a bull in fantasy football. And the last one here, this one is certainly for the deeper leagues. This one's for the 16-team folks. But Trey Tucker with the Vegas Raiders, 8% rostered. Targets and opportunities are all over the place for this guy. But he is a real speed factor on this team. And the Raiders actually have a pretty good schedule. So I know I made the joke earlier with Toxic, but the Raiders actually have a pretty good schedule for the fantasy playoffs. They have Atlanta this week, Jacksonville next week, and then New Orleans to close out the fantasy playoffs. I think he is a good, if you are desperate, option at the wide receiver spot as they look to see what they have going into next year, when they obviously will have a new quarterback and probably a whole lot of new out in Vegas. And I think Trey Tucker could be someone that they look to keep around. At running back, our number one option for the second week in a row is a San Francisco 49er, Patrick Taylor Jr. We all knew we'd be talking about Patrick Taylor Jr., or PTJ, as I've obviously long time called him. 6% rostered. It's next man up in San Francisco. Isaac Guerrero gets banged up last week at the end of the 49ers game against the Chicago Bears, and San Francisco plays 2 days from now. They have the Thursday night game. I'm pretty sure it's against Seattle. Probably should have looked that up. Either way, big game. And again, the same stuff applies from Guerrero over now to PTJ, that he is someone that is going to get probably a lot of opportunities given San Francisco's offense and how they run things. They had a really good week here against the Chicago Bears. I'm not anticipating 38 points being scored again, but I think Patrick Taylor Jr. is someone that you can trust. Another one, and I was very surprised to see him available. But Jaleel McLaughlin at 13% rostered for the Denver Broncos. 16 opportunities in their game before the bye. He looks like the hottest hand out in out in Denver right now. It was coming off of a game against Cleveland. It's a three-headed situation out there right now with Javonte, with McLaughlin, and with Estime. And it really does just kind of seem like it's riding the hot hand. McLaughlin was clearly the best running back for Denver in that last game, so I think he's going to get the opportunity to prove that he is that again. And it's a decent matchup against the Colts. The rest of the schedule for Denver isn't easy, and so this is more of a 1 week plug and play sort of a situation, and worry about next week, but I think he is fine this week. Again, maybe not the best waiver wire segment if we're bringing up 2 Raiders, but Sincere McCormick, not that lying McCormick. This one's the sincere one for the Raiders at 16% rostered. Double-digit opportunities in the last 2 games. It's a tougher matchup against the Falcons, but then after that, the Falcons' run defense is pretty good. But we talked about it a bit before when, again, we talked about way too many Vegas Raiders in the playoffs. But Trey Tucker, they got Jacksonville and New Orleans after that. You can run on those teams. And Sincere McCormick, again, I think is going to get some opportunities. They just, before we started here, put Zamir White on IR. And so I think now McCormick is going to have an opportunity to show what he can do in that Raider backfield. Another one, this one is a little bit more of a let's wait and see, and honestly, if he's available, this might be a bit more of a defensive move, as Isaiah Davis of the New York Jets is 11% rostered, 10 carries and 6 targets this last week. He has touchdowns in back-to-back weeks. The volume is entirely dependent on if Breece Hall is going to be back or not. It's a good matchup against Jacksonville. The Rams, you can run on them, and then you can actually run on the Bills, and that's who the Jets have in Week 17. If the Jets are just going to call it with Breece Hall, Isaiah Davis, I think, is going to be someone who has a lot of value. And again, maybe you picked him up this week and you're rolling with him, but if he is available in your league, this might be I'm going to get this guy so other teams don't when it comes down to the next couple of weeks. And the last one here is Kendre Miller, at 4% rostered, 10 carries and a target this last week. Their season is done. I know they just beat the Giants, but the season's pretty well over for New Orleans, and he could be a part of the future. So I do think that we're going to see a little bit more volume for Miller this week. They have Washington coming up. That's a defense I think you can run on. Green Bay and Las Vegas, it's not the best schedule. It's not the worst schedule either. And so whether it is as a handcuff for Kamara, or kind of a bet that New Orleans is going to want to see what they have in this kid. I think either way, it's a pretty good option for you if you are looking for a running back here this week. At the tight end spot, Noah Fant. He is someone who we continue to bring up. Tight end sucks. We all know this. 19% rostered, 4 targets in 4 straight games, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's tight end. It's a good matchup with Green Bay on an offense that's starting to pick up some steam. I think Noah Fant is a very good if you're desperate play. Another one, I was surprised he was only 10% rostered. Juwan Johnson. There isn't a whole lot left out in New Orleans in terms of pass catching options. Now, there isn't a whole lot left for pass throwing options either in New Orleans, but Juwan Johnson is certainly going to be someone who I think gets quite a few looks. With Taysom Hill now out of the lineup for the season, there isn't much in this offense, and so I think Johnson has some pretty good value. And then on the defensive side of things, the Cincinnati Bengals, 34% rostered. They are facing Tennessee, which is a good matchup coming off of a 6-point performance against Jacksonville. Also, Washington, 24% rostered. They are facing the Saints, who, with everyone banged up, may have the worst roster in the league. And then lastly, Atlanta, 10% rostered, great matchup with the Raiders, and then they get the Giants next week. So this could be a bit of a carryover play, so you just don't have to worry about it for a couple of weeks with a couple of cake matchups for Atlanta. The thing you worry about with the Falcons is they've been giving up quite a few points lately because they're on the field a ton because Kirk Cousins keeps giving the ball to the wrong team. And so you're hoping for pick sixes thrown by Kirk Cousins, not just interceptions that put them in bad positions. So you really hope Kirk Cousins just goes way off the rails and is throwing pick six now instead of interceptions. But against the Raiders, I don't think that's really going to be a concern. You do worry maybe a little bit about the Giants there, but I still think that is a matchup that you want to take advantage of from a fantasy football standpoint. So those are the kind of breakdown in terms of the, I guess, must adds or the top ones at each position. We're looking at Bryce Young, again, 6% rostered for Carolina. Xavier Legette, also 28% rostered for the Carolina Panthers. I think that's it's not a bad stack when we look at daily fantasy coming up later on in the week. And I think he is someone that you feel pretty comfortable with. Patrick Taylor is the next man up at the running back spot. A few good running back options available this week, but I think he is the one that should be the main priority. At 19% owned at tight end, it is Noah Fant. And then our defense, Washington, 24% rostered. I think that is one that has probably the best matchup, although talking through it on the Atlanta side, it did feel like maybe there was a little bit more there than just in terms of kind of a couple bigger options going down the line. But either way, I think the fantasy football waiver wire this week should be able to help you as we get into the playoffs. Obviously, you want to find some unexpected performances as you go dumpster diving in the fantasy football waiver wire. So each week here on Couch Potato Diary, we look at the dumpster darlings, the players who put up the best unexpected performances from the previous week. Let's look at those now. So, each week on Couch Potato Diary, we look at the best performances from the least rostered players in fantasy football, accumulate it all up, and just show how cruel fantasy football can be, that you can put in all the research, all the time, listen to the podcasts, the Twitch streams, the YouTube videos, all of it, and still, these guys come out and just absolutely ruin teams. I will say, in terms of point total, this isn't one of our best, but in terms of roster percentage, I think this is definitely our best. We have one person on here who is owned in more than 10% of leagues. So, feeling really good about the dumpster darlings this week. Coming in at our quarterback position, Drew Lock, 3% rostered, which honestly feels high. 15.98 fantasy points. At wide receiver, Jalen McMillan. Remember, I gave him out as a waiver wire play a few weeks ago. He was someone who I thought was going to have a lot of value. He hasn't until last week. 19.9 fantasy points. Thanks, Raiders. Also a wide receiver, Tim Patrick, 1% rostered with Detroit, 19.3 fantasy points. At running back, Isaiah Davis. He's a waiver wire pickup, maybe, but not a whole lot of teams had him last week. 11% rostered, 14.2 fantasy points. Our running back 2, Ty Johnson, 1% rostered, 12.5 fantasy points. Moving to the tight end position, we have Juwan Johnson, 10% rostered, 13 points. Mac Hollins, apparently he doesn't wear shoes anywhere. No one owned him anywhere, 1% rostered, 13.7 fantasy points. Our kicker this week, Anders Carlson, who I feel like was a snub for Sweden's team at the Four Nations Cup. He comes up with 16 fantasy points for the 4% of teams that rostered him. We're talking about Vegas way too much on a fantasy football show. The Raiders, 3% rostered, which is entirely too many. They put up 9 points against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And so this team, again, to recap with a fancy little graphic, our dumpster darlings, Drew Lock, Jalen McMillan, Tim Patrick, Isaiah Davis, Ty Johnson, Juwan Johnson, Mac Hollins, the Vegas Raiders defense, and Anders Carlson, with Isaiah Davis as our most owned player on this team this week, came up with 133.58 fantasy points. Make it make sense. Fantasy football, just so cruel on a weekly basis. All right, that is the story from fantasy football. Let's get into some wrestling talk. It is the go-home show for Saturday night's main event. WWE Raw was Let's talk about it. WWE is heading towards Saturday night's main event. The go-home episode of Monday Night Raw definitely happened. And that's about as much as we can say about it. I think I'm making it very clear here, I was really underwhelmed with what I saw from Monday Night Raw this week. We'll get into a bit more of the breakdown here. But yeah, I did not find this as an episode that really got the motor running by any stretch of the imagination and made me think that, okay, gotta lock in Saturday night, NBC, let's go. Going to anyway, but this one didn't really build to it. It was there. That's all that was. We got to the main event here and it was like, oh, that's it? And maybe part of it is I'm still accustomed to 3-hour Raws. And this was one of the first 2-hour Raws that I've been able to watch like start to finish live. Although start to finish is a bit of a misnomer. I know they pay me once a week now, but the Sportsnet app, feel like they've given up on the wrestling thing a little bit. Again, full disclosure, I do freelance work for Sportsnet 960 out here in Calgary, but holy hell am I looking forward to Netflix coming up on January 6th. But yeah, this episode didn't really get me all that excited for Saturday night's main event. Yeah, Toxic, I'm with you. I cannot wait for it to move to Netflix. The full library, or it sounds like at least a lot of the library moving over right away. We haven't really had a whole lot of that up here. If you went the Sportsnet route for a long time. So I'm excited to get all of that back and just hammer that and just binge through it. Maybe we do a few watch-alongs on here. I think that'd be fun. Go back and watch a few old things on there. I think that would be a whole lot of fun to hang out with you guys and do some chatting there. Are we getting pay-per-view with it too? Yeah. So all for those of us in Canada, everything, like Netflix is now the WWE network, with the not even I was gonna say with the exception of Friday. That's not true. Everything WWE is over on Netflix starting in January. So Raw will be live on there, NXT will be live on there, SmackDown will be live on there. From all accounts and everything I have seen, the library stuff is going over there, and then the pay-per-views, premium live events, all of that is all going to be over on the Netflix side of things. So yeah, no, I cannot wait. Honestly, Toxic saying already paying for it. That's great. I actually canceled my Netflix subscription a bit ago. Just found we were watching other services a lot more. But so they're going to get a new subscriber with me when everything migrates over here at the end of the month, heading into 2025. So that's exactly what they wanted. But I'm so looking forward to it. I think it's going to be great. Anyway, on to this Raw recap. We start out with the Judgment Day kind of beating down Damian Priest and Gunther. And I just cannot take these guys seriously. And look, I have always been a Finn Balor, the Prince Devitt, whatever fan for a really, really long time. And so him being in the title picture as they go on to network television on a Saturday night feels awesome. And I love that. But the rest of them, like, I can't take this seriously. It is Finn Balor and the goofs who were cannon fodder for Finn Balor and Damian Priest in the Judgment Day, and then the guys who Damian Priest just ran through when he was going after Finn Balor and all of them in Judgment Day. And I feel like I'm a broken record with some of this stuff, because I say it over on the SmackDown side with the Bloodline. I feel like we need to get these guys more wins along with the beatdowns. And they don't have to be 5-star, whatever, classic matches. It can be, even on a 2-hour Raw, you can do enhancement talent match, beat the absolute bejesus out of the poor local wrestlers, have JD McDonough and his giant head and kind of an awful person do whatever he wants to do, and then the Carlito backstep, whatever. Like, just have these guys look impressive in matches. I feel like we see so many beatdowns that it doesn't really resonate as making them as dangerous as you would want them to feel. I still think that there is value in having these guys have wins on television. Like, JD McDonough has had a couple of wins with Finn Balor, obviously, but Carlito hasn't won a match on television since September. It was a 6-man tag against the LWO. He doesn't have a singles win since June on television, and we're supposed to take it seriously that he's beating up Damian Priest and that this is this unstoppable pack of dogs or whatever. I don't buy it. And so I think you need to have these guys in actual in-ring competition looking good and looking impressive instead of just, oh, they're jumping guys from behind and they look dangerous. And so that was kind of it for me. I think the addition of Damian Priest into this matchup on Saturday is going to make for maybe a bit more of an intriguing storyline and kind of balance things out a little bit, as you have the obvious bad guy in Finn Balor, the obvious good guy in Damian Priest, and the definitely should still be a bad guy but kind of feels like a tweener right now, Gunther. I feel like they have kind of built that up and set the stage for that pretty well. It is now just a matter of what can they do to make that match good. And I think the match is going to be really, really good on paper. I don't think it changes the outcome of it at all. Like, I do feel like Gunther is going to remain the dominant champion going through this thing. And so the test here is to see if you can get the audience to buy on at least one near fall in that bout. Also from Raw, Paul Ellering is back. The return helps the Final Testament beat the Wyatt Six. I feel like the Wyatt Six are losing steam a little bit. We did the kidnapping thing with The Miz and all of that, but this hasn't really clicked. I think it's a good mid-card group, and I'm happy that they haven't tried to force it up into the main stories right now. I don't think it would fit, and it still feels like a mid-card group to me, but no one's really excited about this feud with the Final Testament right now. And it's too bad, because I like a lot of the pieces involved. Like, I think the Wyatt Six, there can be a lot of fun with that. I think AOP, I still like AOP. I like Karrion Kross. I know I'm in the minority in that. But I remember watching him as Killer Kross in Impact Wrestling. And then even his stuff in NXT when people really started not liking him. I think there is an amazing character there. This is just one that has not clicked for whatever reason on main roster television. And this is a storyline that feels like it has lowered the importance of all parties involved. We also continue to build things up in the Seth Rollins, CM Punk, Sami Zayn, Drew McIntyre thing. I thought we got good promos this week from Punk, from Seth, and from Sami. I think that you set things up in that rivalry really, really well. And again, I feel like everyone's motivations in this are believable and pretty legitimate. And the reasoning for all of it is sound. I have, like I said, in the past, kind of cautioned against every storyline being, well, we fought against the Bloodline and now you're fighting with the Bloodline. And so every feud with someone who was with Roman Reigns has to have that kind of tangled in. I think there's probably ways that you can do that, but right now it does feel just a little bit one note. So that's the one thing I would say on that. But again, I feel like we got good mic work from all of these guys, and the reasoning from everyone seems sound. I don't think anything really advanced this week. I guess maybe the Seth, like I was the first person you thought of in that. And so the Seth versus Sami thing, you're starting to inch that one a little bit more. But this whole episode of Raw really felt like we need to get to Saturday night's main event. We also have a lot of big things coming up, and we're trying to peak a lot of these into Royal Rumble and then WrestleMania season. And so we don't want to give away too much right now. So this just felt like we're just going to try to get through this one. And it's one of the things I've been thinking about a little bit, where it's, oh, you know what? This is long-term storytelling. And it's like, there's a difference between long-term storytelling and stories that are just long to tell. And right now, these are getting the sense of some of these are just long to tell. This week, I think overall, the builds are going to be good and it's going to be fine. It was just this week, this felt like we really don't have anything. So can we just kind of repeat the same stuff and advance things maybe a half an inch? Fine, we'll work with that and kind of keep things moving. Zelina Vega against Ivy Nile against Lyra Valkyria. Again, the crowd didn't really get super into this match. It was a fine match, and I like all competitors. And again, this is what the Intercontinental title is for on the women's side, to give these performers specifically opportunities to grow and to shine and to have some stakes in their matches. The one thing I have cautioned against is just, okay, well, it's an Intercontinental title match, so that's the story. We've seen that doesn't work in the tag team division. You need to actually build up stories involving these performers now and get us to care about them and get us to care about the title as well. And so I think Valkyria was the right one to win this bout and was the right one to kind of get this thing moving a little bit. One of the things we talked about in the preview episode yesterday was we want to see a really strong follow-up from the New Day. That was the big angle coming out of last week. That was the big thing. This was, okay, massive storyline. I want this to be a big focus for Saturday night's main event. And it just didn't feel like that was it. We did establish that hating these guys is what we need to do. And because I think like last week's segment was pretty well received. And when you have A, the New Day, and B, bad guys who do things really well, there can be a bit of a sense of trying to the audience latching on, and they're now the cool bad guys and we cheer them a whole lot. And I think this segment did a really good job of pushing that away and just, you know what? No, these are bad guys. We boo the bad guys. And so I think it was nice. I think it was unique. I would have liked a bit more importance maybe put on it and really driving home that this is one of your A stories. I wanted some representation of this on Saturday night's main event. Maybe I'm putting a bit too much importance on Saturday night's main event, but I just think that's going to be a gigantic TV audience and an opportunity, maybe not gigantic, but it's going to be a good TV audience and an opportunity to really shine a spotlight on some of your higher level stories, and I think this one can be that. And so I was hoping to maybe get a bit of an advancement on that, but again, we're going in a bit of a longer term direction with this one. And so I think when you just look at this segment as a whole, when we're done with the New Day thing 9-10 months from now or whenever it is, I do think that we're going to look at this segment and you know what, that was good. Because a lot of times, how many, like with Dominic Mysterio, there's probably other more current representation than this, but when I was at WrestleMania, coming up on 10 years ago, out in Dallas, and it was the night after WrestleMania, Roman Reigns had just beat Triple H for the whatever the championship was called at the time, and the crowd just booed every time Roman Reigns brought the mic up to his mouth. And it ended up being like a 17-minute segment and he got a few things out. So we've seen it in the past and they eventually the crowd quiets down and they grind through. To have this just be a walk-off, I thought was a nice, unique look at how to handle that. And so we didn't really get the follow-up that I wanted, but I think in terms of being an effective segment and a unique segment, I think this one kind of checked a lot of the boxes. And the New Day stuff throughout the night, I thought was good. Like having Cody come out and say, you should be ashamed of yourself. I thought was good. And then having Cody coming out of Adam Pearce's office, you just get a bit of a, what's going on here? So you tie a couple of those things in. The one thing I wanted a little bit more from, Xavier Woods grabs the camera. And I thought that was an interesting touch because then Wade Barrett says, finally, we're going to see this from the New Day's perspective. I'm like, okay, this is really good. That's a really creative way of doing this. And then it kind of just didn't lead to anything. And so if you would have had Xavier do that, and then Kofi cuts at least a little bit of a promo, I thought it would have been a perfect way to tie all that together. But instead, we just got surprisingly good camera work from a pro wrestler walking down the ring, and then he puts it on the thing and he does a little bit of a and that's it. And so I thought it was a really good idea that got 80% of the way there. And then in the main event, Rhea Ripley taking on Raquel Rodriguez, I thought they brought the heat. I thought it was an aggressive match that met the moment they were trying to get to. Again, Io coming out, going after Liv, it's a nice touch. It gets the crowd really into it. And as the main event segment on a 2-hour Raw, it really drives home the importance of this match. And it makes it feel like a main event angle because you're putting it in the main event. The one thing I didn't love was a stare down at the end with Rhea and Io. I feel like more of the focus should be on Liv right now. Rhea gets focused just on herself, right? Like she passes that airport test that the previous regime wanted, where you just see her on television, you see her in the airport, it's like, you are something. If I've never seen wrestling before, I don't know what you are, but you are famous. I just don't know for what. Rhea passes that. So she doesn't need that kind of spotlight. I feel like it should have been maybe a little bit more focused with Io on Liv. But again, I think it legitimized Io a little bit more, having her in that whole thing. And I'm interested to see now what gets going for Saturday night's main event. You guys know that I will be all in on Io Shirai, the genius of this guy, picking up a championship win on network television. Like I said, overall, a pretty blah night. A rare miss from the WWE. This felt like a placeholder going into Saturday night's main event, which I was not necessarily anticipating.